In this episode of On Doers, we talk to Alex Brewer, also known as HENSE. He's the Atlanta-based artist internationally known for his colorful murals in places like the Facebook headquarters, Apple stores, and on the sides of buildings around the world. We discussed how he got started, his creative process, and making it as an artist out of Atlanta. We talked in front of a live audience at Switchyards Downtown Club.
Switchyards, but you're an Atlanta guy, grew up in Candler Park, right?
Yes.
So let's just
born and raised in Atlanta.
There's not many, native Atlantans. Let's just quickly talk through kind of your background growing up.
Grew up in Candler Park. Went to Maryland.
Quickly, what was Candler Park like in the kind of the 80s when you grew up?
Let's see. By the time I was born in '78, the house I grew up in, my folks bought in 1970, and throughout the 80s, Candler Park was already, I think, starting to become a better neighborhood. But they told me, in the 70s, and it was still, kind of, I don't want to say rough, but it was definitely not gentrified at all. I went to Maryland Elementary, which is now a really good school. But when I went there, it was, it really wasn't, it didn't have the high reviews that it does now. Yeah. Candler Park, I think it has sort of this like hippie vibe to it. And by the time that I want to say the 80s came around, it started to become more, less about like, I would say like less hippie, but I guess it's always had sort of like a bohemian kind of feel to it. But it certainly is it was a great place to grow up, and today it's still one of my favorite neighborhoods. Inman Park is another one that apparently went through a really bad time. This was before I was born, but you probably have heard stories about all those beautiful homes in Inman Park were at one point in time turned into apartments, and just kind of definitely not selling for the prices that they are today.
So growing up, were you, just to get a little bit of your kind of backstory and what kind of inspired you? Were you always like a creative kid? To do the stuff that you do now, there had to be some signs when you look back at your youth that you could tell this was something that you were different than some of the other kids.
Yeah, I mean, I was always into creativity. I think that I expressed interest in art pretty early on. Both my parents had a background in architecture and design. My dad went to Ringling in Sarasota, and then also Tulane in New Orleans. Started his own company, so he was into real estate, architecture, design, things like that. And so I guess I was exposed to a lot of really, like spaces like this, when I was growing up, just, awesome tall ceilings and really creative build-outs and renovations, and I think that kind of sparked an interest pretty early on, I would say, as far as architecture. As far as getting into painting and drawing, ever since I can remember, that was something that I wanted to explore. I mean, it was just like, it's always been a part of me. I don't remember, there was never a time when I was like, I don't know what I want to do. But, I always wanted to be an artist.
You thought you could do that as a career, or you thought you would just do that for fun?
I think when I was younger, I didn't even know what a career was. I mean, I thought like being an artist was probably not realistic. I just thought that's something that you could strive to try to do. But when you're young, you don't really know how to go about. You have no knowledge of business. You have no knowledge of how to navigate yourself throughout the art world, or even a career in design or architecture. So I don't know that I ever thought about it like that. I think I just knew that I want to do that. I'd watch documentaries on artists, like Picasso or Pollock, and I want to do that. I don't know how to do it, but I just want to do that, and I want to make money doing it.
So when you were, call it high school, you went to Grady, and when you were kind of high school, and then you went to college for a little bit, or?
Yeah, I went to a boarding school in Virginia my senior year of high school, which kind of got me interested in the whole northeastern area, DC, New York, Richmond, Virginia, and I ended up going to VCU in Richmond which is really odd because I was looking at a lot of schools. I was looking at SCAD in Savannah at the time. I got accepted there. And I don't know why I didn't. I mean, SCAD is great. I don't know why I didn't choose to go there. But I went to VCU and essentially was there for like a semester and then dropped out because I just wasn't. It wasn't because I didn't like the atmosphere. It just for whatever reason I was 18 years old and it just wasn't. I didn't want to commit myself to 4 years of that.
So you said you didn't even know what a career was, and you didn't know you could necessarily do this as a career, but you just started kind of. What were your original kind of, around this time frame? What were your original kind of things you were doing from an art perspective? Was it graffiti?
From what time? Like what time period?
Right after college. Right after you kind of said.
So I back up a little bit if that's all right with you. When I was 14, right around 13, 14, I kind of started getting into like skateboarding, like a lot of young kids, and with that came graffiti and stickers and music, and I was obsessed with Nirvana, and I thought Kurt Cobain was like, a god, and all this like DIY culture was just like I didn't want to be. I just like anything mainstream like I thought sucked. Like my parents took me to Disney World when I was in high school, and I was just like, I was miserable. It was like the worst thing ever. And in hindsight now, my wife and I go, and I do enjoy it, but like it was
a sign of maturity, or
I guess so,
or
yeah.
Softening up.
I don't,
mainstream,
yeah,
or what?
I don't know. I just remember not wanting to partake in any kind of mainstream, lifestyle or whatnot, and I guess rebellion. A lot of the music I was listening to was very rebellious, and so was graffiti and skating and just being, and not that I ever really took skating seriously, but I definitely dabbled, and I think that just sort of led me into this deep dark path of graffiti, really, and that's sort of probably why I didn't continue with art school. But having said that, I definitely wanted to have a career in arts, and I wanted to be a studio artist, but I didn't know. I guess, frankly, I thought it was more interesting to go outside and paint on something than go in take a drawing class.
So tell me about, I don't know much about like the graffiti world. You were deep into it for a long period of time, and I imagine it's changed over the years. But when you're like, 19, 20 years old, or 16, 17, around that age, teenager, and you're kind of getting into this like graffiti world, like what? I read some articles where you kind of just had to like figure it out. You saw some stuff you liked, and you're just kind of like figuring it out on your own, right? There's a lot of just unsaid.
It goes back to that whole just like do it yourself thing. We would go down, and this is in high school. My friends and I would there was a couple of like ACA, Atlanta College of Art, was really, when it was still here, was very much a creative incubator, and there was a lot of really great artists that went there. Kara Walker is one of them. A lot of other guys that I know that went there, and we would just see, they would actually go and paint at like legal walls that existed here in the city, and we would just like go and stare and watch them paint. We're like, how are they doing this? We want to do that, and then we just kind of, I guess, tried to figure it out. We couldn't get online.
When you say we, it's like you and a few buddies?
Yeah, like me and 2 or 3 friends. And I mean, we couldn't, this was in the early 90s, early mid-90s. I mean, you couldn't just like hop on your iPhone and, like, oh, how do you do that? Let me Google it. No, you couldn't do that. So it was a lot of walking the tracks and just discovering things and getting in trouble and, and not knowing where this is all going to go, not knowing like, hey, is this going to take me into a place of like I'll end up in jail, or is this going to take me to somewhere where I'll actually have a real career as an artist? I wasn't even thinking. I was just, hey, I'm young, I want to go out, I want to paint, and that was it.
And the thrill of like pulling it off was what was like a main driver?
Definitely, yeah. Is addictive, also thrilling, and sort of like I had this idea of, anybody, is like the galleries and all of that were interesting to me, but I was looking at like people like Basquiat, it's like, what was cool about him and what he did is going out and just, painting and then going into a studio and like doing whatever he wanted and not like thinking about how am I going to make something that's going to sell or dealing with, I don't know. It's just a very, as I said before, it's just like a really important to kind of not follow rules.
Yep.
and do it yourself.
What was the first one that I had read that you did a few and they were like, you didn't fully finish or you weren't, you could barely read like the words or whatever. But what was like kind of like the first successful one you got up? Where was it?
I don't really remember like the first. I know that with what's now the Beltline, that used to be an abandoned corridor, and we used to find places to paint along that that corridor, and I guess that's kind of where we cut our teeth, or where I cut my teeth, and I think getting that feeling like something was successful would be probably, because there were times where I would do something and think, oh, that's great, and then I would find out that no, that's actually terrible, based on what either what somebody painted over because they painted over me, or what they wrote on it, or or what I heard. And I think when I started to meet older guys that were other peers that were involved in graffiti, and they were giving me respect, and I was like, okay, man, I'm actually like, maybe I'm like doing something right, and then kind of led to me being like, hey, I don't care what they think either. I just want to do something that I'm happy with. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I look back at that, and it definitely, I learned a lot, but I'm glad that I've not, that I've moved on, and I'm not, because I have friends that's all they still do that.
Still do that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you get asked this a bunch, but your name comes about during that period of time, right? You need something to kind of put up. You need a tag. I mean,
it was in high school, and again, just it's like you think about a band, like they go by a band's name. It's like. And then also with graffiti, it was very, it started in New York and Philadelphia, and that's how people came up with these aliases, and it was all about an alias. And just like with musicians, they don't necessarily. I mean, not all musicians go by a band. Some go by their Tom York has his solo career as well, but Radiohead, that's like So it was like kind of identifying with that. Hey, I want to do something under a different name, but not my real name. Obviously, for legal reasons too, like you can't be out there writing your own name.
But no one would think you would actually put your birth name up there, so they would never go after that person.
That it's funny. I thought I would give somebody huge amounts of credit if they were today doing that, because it would be very unique and original and very risky. I mean, Banksy doesn't go around writing his real name. I think it'd be cool if he did.
Yeah. So how'd you come up with the name?
Just going through a dictionary, looking at different names, and I had a few other really bad names prior to that, and just came up with that based on certain letter combinations that I was looking for. It was also something that it didn't necessarily. I mean, it does have a meaning, but I spell it a little differently, and it wasn't something that had like a direct. When you think of it, okay, this is either positive or negative. It was just sort of this like word that really can't say anything bad about, So
yeah. So how long roughly were you doing graffiti?
On and off for I don't know, 15 years or more.
And literally didn't get paid a dime for any of that, right? I mean, during that period.
In that period, I mean, it was more. It wasn't about money. None of that was about money. It was more about like we would travel. I'd go to LA and hang out with my friends and paint, or we would go to San Francisco, and we eventually went to Tokyo and Taipei, and so it started to kind of get that taste of international travel and meeting new people. And yeah, it wasn't about the money, but at some point I think I did this throughout my 20s, and I started kind of realizing, hey, I really want to, and I mean, simultaneously I was trying to make paintings and trying to show in galleries, but at some point I did sort of say, look, if I want to take my art seriously, I can't keep going out, and it wasn't like a cold turkey thing. It was just like, it's not something I can, I guess I was like, I started becoming less and less interested in doing that.
How much of that work is still up today?
Here in Atlanta, maybe a handful of things off of like Marteline, perhaps. In other cities, I actually have one in Manhattan that's still there that like is going on probably, it's like from 2003, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I would say just a handful of things, mostly here, you know.
So is that that's like a great location or a sign of respect or what?
It could
That
be
it's
a lot
still
of, I would say, good location, but primarily, you know, the building, whoever owns the building has not taken the time to renovate it. For maybe they're an absentee property owner, and it's just. I mean, I'm actually a property owner now, but before I was, I'd never thought of when I saw abandoned buildings, I just thought, you know, there's nobody owns that thing. You know, that thing looks like, and now it's like, well, yeah, somebody definitely owns it. So, you know, you do grow up and you kind of realize. You know, it's this like, because I don't want to sit here and say that I don't think that people should do it, you know, go out and write on other people's property, but I don't want to endorse it either because you know, I think some really great stuff that happens all over the world does happen in public space without permission. But, you know, as you grow older, you do start realizing that, you know, you got to be a little bit conscious of other people's, you know, properties. So.
What was the first kind of work that you were getting paid for? Was it the city kind of commissioning like legit murals, or was it private art? What were your first kind of paying gigs?
I started working with a gallery here in Atlanta, and then showing in group shows. Like we went to Tokyo in 2006 for a group exhibit, and so I was like always making paintings and trying to, you know, sell them through some sort of channels. I would say that the first. Are you speaking more on like public art or just paintings?
Just or the first stuff that someone said, this, like, you know, I'm going to pay you for this.
That's a. Yeah, I mean, I probably at some point got paid to do some stupid job when I was like really young, where it was like, yeah, I want you to, and I, you know. But as far as something that I was really proud of, that was a big commission, I don't know. I mean, it would. You know, sometime in the mid 2000s, probably. You know, I would say.
So roughly in your kind of 30s, as you kind of enter your 30s,
I started when I was 29. I had my first solo show when I was 28, and so 28, 29, 30. Those 3 years, I was like, kind of, you know, getting it together as far as not painting as much outdoors illegally and focusing more on my studio work and exhibits and starting to really think about public art. I would say that was sort of, you know, yeah. When I was in my 20s, it was, you know, just kind of, yeah, still learning and painting and doing things like that, but still not really thinking about a career. You know, where is this all going to go?
How do you balance the business side of this, you know, in the creative side? I mean, you're wearing both hats, right? Like you have to do kind of both of these, especially in the early days as you're starting to, you know, kind of get paid for stuff.
As far as what, like running your own company?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so you go from this highly creative process where it's just like, I'm not worried about money. You know, you said I'm not worried about money. I just want to go out and make art.
Right.
And now you have to kind of worry about billing someone and a legal entity. And
insurance and all.
This,
yeah, I mean, it's
so how do you handle now? So that means that's eating into your kind of creative time.
Yeah, like right now I'm currently renovating my studio. I bought a building and I'm renovating it, and it is both rewarding and frustrating at the same time, because it's something I'm learning, but I'm also frustrated because it's like I just want to be done so I can get in there and paint. You know, it's like I want to just be done with this. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm being creative by renovating, but it's like in a different way. It's not, I'm not doing the work. I'm hiring people to do the work. You know, but I'm making creative decisions. But I just want to be done so I can, you know, do what I love to do. And yeah, it's I think it's part of an evolution, and I realize that, you know, you kind of have to do that in order to grow, both creatively and within your business. And you know, a lot of the artists that I admire, you know, the reason that why I admire them is because not only their work that they're making and their you know, creative process, but also their business ethics and the way that they are navigating themselves and the way they market themselves, the way that they handle all of those business relationships. I mean, it's all really important. It's a big, and then social media is another thing. It's like all of that fits together, and you kind of have to try to work it all together as one package. And I don't know. It's.
Do you have a team, or is it just you now?
I have my wife is a graphic designer, art director actually, so she helps with a lot of creative decisions, and then I have an assistant who helps me when I need help on large murals or things like that, and then I'll have people help me out in the studio every once in a while. But I like to keep things really small. I like to remain small business. I'm not interested in being Jeff Koons and having 100 employees. I just don't want to do that. That sounds. I mean, I love Jeff Koons, but that just doesn't sound like something that would work for me,
So who's kind of your inspiration? Like, does someone have a career that you admire?
A lot of people, yeah. I mean, within art or within just like
Let's go everything.
I mean, Steve Jobs is somebody that I definitely look up to. Elon Musk. I mean, anybody that. Katharina Gross, she's an artist and a German artist. God, I mean, there are so many, I guess, that Jose Parla, Cause. I mean, people who have been able to have great success and remain and not let the quality go down. Not have this big success and then they turn into this like crappy version of what they used to be. Like that, that really annoys me, both within the art world and also within just business. But yeah, there are a lot of people. Killer Mike, I mean, he's an Atlanta guy that I know personally, and I mean, what he's done with his stuff is great. I mean, he's been able to reinvent himself for for the better. I mean, it's he's doing really awesome things. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but it could go across all different genres. I would say, not only art, but music, also business, architecture, things like that.
Do you find yourself spending more time on the business side of things now? I mean, are you getting savvier on that front, or you try to stay away from it?
No, I have to. I mean, I can't escape that. I generally spend a lot of my day working on. First of all, not every day is going to be a day in the studio of just throwing paint at a canvas. That's not realistic. I think that at one point in time I thought that's what artists did, and I think you can, but it's not that. It's not every day. I mean, you got to answer emails, you've got to make phone calls, so I spend a lot of my time in front of a computer, and that could be answering or writing emails or designing, doing mock-ups for projects. And then as well as just going to pick up materials, ordering materials, traveling. I mean, it's just a lot of different things that take place other than painting.
What % of your business is just word of mouth? Like, how do you? I mean, so if you took the last 10 projects that you've done, what % of those were? They saw my work, or they knew the person that I did another project for, and they recommended me.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You're not selling in art. You're not making cold calls to people.
No, no way. And like, that's a really good question. I think every relationship's important, and I think it's like you sort of have to build off every relationship and have relationships with people, knowing that, hey, this may not turn into an opportunity. This may just be a friendship, or it may be an opportunity in a different way, like a different, something positive may come out of it that you never even thought about. So I try to keep that attitude and treat every project with the same, like it's the first one, really.
Do you sweat or worry about deal flow? Like, do you? I mean, and maybe you don't now, but I'm sure there was a point in time where you worry about, where's my next one coming from?
Yeah, that was a scary moment to think, hey, okay, well, what if there's not a paycheck coming anytime soon? And you get over that. It's not. What I'm learning now is once you get involved with real estate and things like that, it becomes totally different. It's not about it's not just about like that check coming every single month. I mean, you kind of get to a point where you can float for a little while. But going back to what you said about what was that question you
Like
asked?
the word of mouth and
Yeah, yeah. I would say that honestly, I can't really. It's hard to answer. I know I'll get an email from somebody and they won't directly say, hey, this person, we found your work through this channel, but I'll sort of in some cases they will make it very clear, but like for example, I did the new Facebook headquarters last year, and when I got the email about it, I was excited, but it wasn't really like when I got out there and met with the guy who was coordinating and curating it, he never really told me. He wasn't like, look, the reason that I honed in on your work was because of this. It's just sort of like, we like what you do, and I think maintaining a good web presence is really important for anybody, and being somewhat active on social media. You made a joke about no Twitter, but yeah, I mean it's like I don't think you have to do it all, but at least have something so that people can kind of see what you're doing.
Yep. Well, how would you describe your style?
That's a tough question. I mean I'm primarily interested in abstraction, and always have been, even when I was doing the letter-based graffiti, because even with that you're basically breaking down letters into abstract forms. So it was letters, but it was sort of abstracting the letters. So yeah, that's where I'm definitely committed to that for sure.
But do you try to intentionally not box yourself into anything? I mean, has your style changed over the years? I mean,
definitely, yeah. Like I when I first started doing large scale murals, I was sort of looking at drawings that I was making, and hey, how can I translate this to a larger scale? And I was also looking at what else was going around throughout the world. And I remember thinking that, at the time, everything needs to be very tight and clean, and I need to it needs to look very graphic. At some point I was like, why am I thinking this way? And Taylor, my assistant, was really, really helpful in pushing me to dude, why don't you just take a brush and get real loose and do kind of what you do in your studio? And I remember trying that, and it's like, wow, it's like just experimenting and trying new things, and I think it's really important. And I guess I just sort of I always want to feel like I'm doing something new and not stuck to a concept. I don't want to be an artist that's always known for just that one thing. And with an abstraction, you kind of have the ability to do really, if you're exploring form and color and line and things like that, you can there's so much within that to explore. So yeah, I'm always looking, and thinking about what, how else can I do this idea, and yeah, I've tried to change things up a bit, but not too drastically, I don't want to all of a sudden I'm painting portraits or something. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I put up here, a lot of your stuff, some Atlanta stuff and whatever, just a few, but just to get to the kind of the highlight reel of your stuff. I mean, you mentioned the Facebook headquarters. There's the Apple store in Miami on Lincoln Road, and there's a bunch of Atlanta stuff and some early stuff too. But what are kind of what are the ones that just get talked about, when people talk about you the most?
I think that I feel like the last few years, some of the really large scale stuff that we've done has been really a lot of fun. It's been a dream, because it's you're painting at this huge scale and in a different part of the world, and so I think my favorite projects would be those that have occurred in the last few years that were either in Australia or Peru.
So the silos were in Australia, right?
Yeah, Western Australia.
So how big are those silos?
The height it's over. I want to say it's over 100 feet. I'm not maybe 120 feet. Definitely high. Really really high. And the one in Lima, Peru, was the tallest that we had done, and that was just like once in a lifetime experience. Like,
Are you afraid of heights?
I'm not a big fan of them. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, am I gonna not do it because I don't want to be up there? No, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna be shitting myself while I'm doing it. I mean, it's like you just kind of but it's fun. It's like you get over it and you kind of realize like, okay, it's not that bad, and you just kind of go with it. And
So like the silos as an example, that was a what was the why'd they want to do that? I mean, was that the owner? Was it inspired by the owner of that land?
That was it was funded and curated through an organization called Form, which is a nonprofit arts organization in Western Australia. They're based in Perth, and they do a lot of projects, not only like this, like public site-specific public projects, but they also do a lot of gallery exhibits and programming, throughout Perth and in the Wheat Belt, which that's where that was, the Wheat Belt region. So the CBH group owns those silos, and this part of Western Australia is they're basically bringing in the wheat, taking it through the cars, they store it in the silos, and then it gets shipped out. And I think they approached Forum and said, hey, we've got these silos, and we want to have an artist. They didn't say we want this artist. We just want a artist to paint these, and they said, well, I think they put a couple of different artists in front of them, and I happened to be one of them, and I was fortunate enough that they wanted to go with me. So yeah, I mean that was like another just once in a lifetime experience. I've always wanted to paint something that was three-dimensional like that, especially with the curves and also those silos. If I'm not mistaken, were built probably the 50s or 60s, and those they don't make them like that anymore. They make now when they build them, they're typically with the metal, and those were like the solid concrete, which is really really cool.
And just in terms of Atlanta stuff, and there's the West Side Cultural Arts Center.
Yeah.
There's the Contemporary, kind of in the West Side, off of Mean Street, which is up here. There's some stuff on South Broad, right?
Yeah.
Or there's those two buildings on Broad, right?
Yeah.
There's the Beltline. Is that probably your most photographed one? The one on the Beltline?
The one
near 10th Street.
I would say so. Yeah, that actually, I did an original piece there in 2010 when the Beltline first launched their public art program, the temporary public art program. So I did one there, and then I was invited back. I think it was 2014 to do that, because the first piece that I'd done, because these things are supposed to be site specific and very temporary. Obviously a mural, if you don't clear coat it and you don't take the appropriate measures, to make sure it's going to stay for a long time, it probably won't last forever. So with that first one, I ended up coming back and doing the one you're talking about on top of it, because the first one had just been written on and kind of it could have been restored, but I just chose to come back and do something new, freshen it up, and yeah, I do see like a lot of the, like on Instagram particularly, a lot of photos of that, which it's really cool. I mean, it's like I remember painting, frankly, actually, in that underpass, and it was nothing but like homeless people. Those tracks were there. It was trash everywhere, and now it's like this. Just it's kind of like people come through there all the time and ride their bikes and jog. It's great. It's really, I think, at least it'll be interesting when transit comes in. I don't know how that'll curb the pedestrian component, but
what inspires you?
A lot of things. I mean, this renovation I think is pretty inspiring. I mean, any architecture, a good renovation, a good cocktail, coffee, visiting new cities.
What cities inspire you?
I mean, Perth. Anywhere that I've been in Australia is inspiring. Paris, New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, Taipei, Taiwan, Tokyo. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of South America, Central America, Mexico is inspiring. I mean, there's Atlanta. I mean, like the Marietta, like the old warehouses here, over off of Marietta Street, that have like the roll-up doors and all the old brick. But this building, I mean, anything that has like rich history is, I think, is really inspiring. The Ponce City Market building is really, that building inspired me before they renovated it, and it inspires me now in a different way.
What cities have, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but what cities have particularly strong kind of public art? And so that's the first part, and the second part is, what does that do for a city? So obviously living walls and Elevate and outer space, there's a lot of stuff in Atlanta now.
The programming, like
yeah,
public art
programming,
programming.
that's kind of legitimate, making this, legitimate art on unused brick walls, and there's a few, as an example, downtown, but there's a lot more buildings that have, that could use it. Anyway, what cities do a really good job of that, and then what does that do for a city? So, what does that do for a neighborhood? South Broad. I mean, the idea was these were kind of abandoned buildings, and let's kind of brighten them up a little bit, and at least put something interesting on them. But what does this? What does this do?
I think it can do a lot of things. I mean, I think firstly, like with South Broad, it's like what we did. By no means did we transform that neighborhood overnight by painting. Like, let's face it. Like, we did a couple of murals. Like, we didn't, all of a sudden the next day, it's not like, oh, this is a great neighborhood now. That didn't work that way. But I think it at least showed that, hey, somebody's, cares. The city cares. We're trying to do, take the right steps to make this area more accessible and not so, ominous, or whatnot. But I think since then, my understanding is that a gallery has come in and it's gotten a lot better. And I really think it comes down to the individual building owners, and if they're willing to either sell it to somebody that is going to renovate that, do something positive, or do it themselves. I think where you have problems, and particularly in downtown Atlanta, you have a lot of absentee property owners, like the one on South Broad that I painted. The guy lives in New York. I mean, he's not here. He doesn't care what's going on in Atlanta. He just he owns this building. It's in bad condition, but and he may have sold it. I'm not sure, but I think going back to the public art, I think it can really do a lot, and it just doesn't it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it really doesn't. I think it takes. Here in Atlanta, we have, as you mentioned, 3 or 4 different organizations that are really doing a lot of programming around public art, and Elevate being one of them, and Living Walls, and then the Flux projects that happens, and I think that all that together sort of can create something. One guy going out and doing a wall isn't going to do anything, but I think that definitely it just shows that people actually care about their communities. And I think now, throughout the world, not even just the United States, but globally, we're seeing more. We're seeing the opposite of what we saw in the '70s. People want to live in the cities; they don't want to live in the suburbs. Well, I have a few friends that do, but I don't. I don't really agree with that. But yeah, it's most people are wanting to, come back in the city, and with that comes better school systems, better quality life, more homes being renovated. More restaurants and coffee shops, and more public art. I think public art is not just murals. It's also sculpture and temporary installations, like what the Beltline's doing. The High Line in New York is a great example of, I think, successful public art, both temporary and permanent.
What would you tell like a young artist just starting off? So 2 more questions. This is one of them. What would you what are a few just kind of pieces of advice that you would tell someone starting a creative, like just kicking off a creative journey?
How old are they?
I mean, like young, at the beginning of the thing where it's just like, you're just having fun doing it, but you don't see any like future,
Yeah, I would say, by no means would I encourage them to not go to college. I mean, I would probably say, if it was my son, I would say, if you want to be an artist, I would definitely encourage them to look into art school as an option. Doesn't mean that that's what they have to do, and if they chose to not do that, I would be okay with it. I think the main important, the really important thing is to believe in yourself and believe in your work, and don't take no for an answer. Treat every project with that same passion. Try to, even when you have those blocks where you're feeling like your ideas are worthless, and you're feeling like it's so competitive, and you can't, there's no way you can possibly make a dent in this thick, art world that's out there. And you have to realize that there's room for everybody. It's not just, it's like the people that are up there that have made, Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst, and yeah, those guys are at the top. But it doesn't mean you have to be them. You can carve out something that is going to make, it's going to be great for you. And it's the same thing with, it's like with companies. You can't, you want to start a tech company or a computer company, yeah, Apple, but I mean, you could do something else. There's a zillion other ideas out there that you could do that are not something that Apple has done. And I think I would just advise that, to try to stay creative, try to work through any, creative blocks that you have by believing in yourself, and try not to get hung up. And I need to take my own advice on this, but my wife would definitely, she hears me complaining a lot about these very things, but try to think, hey, look, don't worry about what other people think. Don't if you feel like you got rejected for some reason, you didn't get the grant, or you didn't, whatever happened, try to fight through that and try to just say, yep, we'll take that energy you feel and move that towards, going out and doing something that's going to really give you that not only a good feeling but also some kind of upward mobility.
So one thing that struck me about you in the little bit of time that I've kind of just been able to talk to you is how kind of chill and down to earth and kind of normal you are. Not that all artists are zany and kind of out there, but it's really interesting to me that you're kind of just a really chill dude. And just kind of really normal. And I think if someone was walking past
what's
you
normal though?
that's a good point. But if someone were walking past you on the street, I don't think they would pick you as the guy doing this. I don't think that's like, and it's just and so anyway, is that
yeah, I know what you mean, because like I remember back to like when we first got into graffiti, we used to think like, who's doing this stuff? Like, what does he look like? Like that was like so fascinating. It was like, are they have dreads? Are they have a shaved head? Like what, and we would hear like through the grapevine, oh no, it's like this, like, he looks like this, or it's a girl, or, and I don't know. I think artists come in all different shapes and sizes, and it's like, I don't know. I think some of my favorite artists, Ellsworth Kelly and Richard Tuttle. I mean, those guys, I don't know them. I don't know them personally, but it seem like pretty normal people. I mean, yeah, maybe their art's a little weird and out there, but that, it's hard. It's hard to judge a book by the cover. But yeah, I mean, I have plenty of artist friends that are exactly what you're describing. Just they're a little unpredictable and crazy, and but yeah, I think we're all, I mean, nobody's exempt. I think we're all a little bit nuts.
Yep. Yeah, you just wouldn't expect a guy who's put in some interesting situations doing like graffiti art has such a kind of a conscious and a level-headed kind of point of view.
I think when I was younger, I was definitely more. I think I was always a reasonable person, but I certainly was not. I'm not the guy you're talking to right now. I was more just different motivations, and just younger and a little wilder, but never really I was never that guy that was just out of control. Again, I have friends that were that way, and it's, I mean, you got to have people like that. You have people that are really chill and calm, and then people that are just, I mean, I think within like acting, I mean, I've heard some actors, it's so easy to work with, and then, oh, this guy is just, a just complete nightmare. I mean, it just seems like throughout every industry you have, like Jobs. I mean, he seems like such a, but I've just like heard stories about him where he was not that easy to work with. So yeah.
So you've said a few times, and it means a lot that this building is interesting and inspiring and all that kind of stuff, which means a lot coming from you. So one thing we want to do is give you a Switchyards membership. So you have your own mug and an access card, and so you can come in, and the access card says,
nice.
Make something beautiful today.
Oh, thank you.
Which you do that frequently. So anyway,
that's awesome.
come to Switchyards whenever you want. Your mug will be on the wall. Appreciate you coming out and doing that.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.